The lights of Studio 6B shimmered with their usual hypnotic glow, painting the stage in hues of gold and blue. For millions watching at home, it was another night of The Tonight Show, laughter waiting to be cued, applause primed to erupt on command, and America's familiar late-night host ready to charm his way through another hour. But not tonight. Something was off from the very beginning. Jimmy Fallon leaned forward behind his sleek mahogany desk, grinning wide, his voice bouncing in that carefully rehearsed cadence. Across from him, Miley Cyrus sat in a velvet chair, posture loose but eyes sharp, as though she had walked into a battlefield disguised as a comedy show. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Miley Cyrus," Fallon's words boomed, the crowd clapping obediently, yet beneath the noise lingered an uneasy rhythm. It wasn't the roar of anticipation but the polite echo of routine. Miley smiled faintly, waved, then crossed her legs with the unhurried calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. The interview began with familiar beats, Fallon teasing her about her latest music project, about her ever-changing style, about the moments that had kept her in the headlines for more than a decade. At first glance, it was standard Tonight Show fare, playful, safe, the kind of television that rolled smoothly from segment to segment. But then Fallon leaned too far. "So, Miley," he chuckled, "do you ever look back at that Wrecking Ball video and think, wow, I can't believe I did that?" The audience laughed on cue, the sound booming artificially through the studio speakers. Fallon's grin widened, expecting Miley to toss the joke back, to laugh at herself as most celebrities do under the hot lights. Instead, her smile thinned, her voice dropped. "I don't regret being real, Jimmy. What I regret is how people never let me move past it. They want me stuck in that moment forever, like I'm some punchline that can't grow up." The laughter stuttered, cut short like a record scratch. Fallon blinked, still grinning, but his fingers drummed lightly against the desk. Come on, it was iconic," he said, tone just a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. "People love that version of you." Miley's jaw tightened. She leaned forward, her words slicing through the staged cheer. "People loved the spectacle, but they didn't care who I was underneath it. And that's the problem with shows like this. You keep recycling the same jokes, the same caricatures, instead of letting artists actually be human." Gasps rippled through the audience. A murmur of confusion filled the air, unsure whether to clap, laugh, or fall silent. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every flicker of tension. Fallon's face froze for half a second, a flash of unease hidden beneath the entertainer's mask. He straightened in his chair, forcing another chuckle. "Well, hey, that's why we've got you here," he said, voice tight. "To talk about your music, to have some fun." But Miley didn't soften. Her gaze bore into him, unflinching. "Fun at whose expense?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying more weight than a shout. The room stilled. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer gestured frantically for Fallon to lighten the mood, to move on, to salvage the segment before it spiraled further. But the spell was already broken. For years, Fallon's strength had been his ability to keep things light, to smother tension under waves of laughter and self-deprecation. Tonight, that armor cracked. He smiled, but the smile no longer disarmed. It trembled, brittle under the glare of studio lights. Miley sat back, crossing her arms, no longer a guest but an accuser in a courtroom masquerading as comedy. The audience could feel it. Something irreversible had begun. This wasn't just a late-night interview gone awkward. It was a confrontation, a clash between a host desperate to keep control and an artist refusing to play the role of caricature. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, the tension in the air was electric, a storm cloud hanging above the laughter that had turned hollow. Fallon's grin had dimmed. Miley's voice still echoed in the silence. "Fun at whose expense?" The Tonight Show stage, once a sanctuary of lighthearted escape, had become the scene of a cultural trial, and neither host nor guest would leave unchanged. The camera fades to black after the abrupt commercial break. The audience claps half-heartedly, guided by the cue lights above their heads. In the control room, producers breathe heavy, shuffling papers, whispering into headsets. On the studio floor, Fallon forces his smile back into place, his lips curled like a mask nailed too tightly. But beyond that glittering studio, the empire of late-night television is already shifting under his feet. For decades, late night was more than comedy. It was ritual. Johnny Carson's cigarette pauses, David Letterman's dry wit, Jay Leno's chin-heavy monologues. Each host was both entertainer and cultural referee, telling America what to laugh at and what to ignore. These stages were safe havens, where laughter disguised judgment, where the biggest scandals could be wrapped in punchlines before bed. Jimmy Fallon inherited that tradition at a moment of fracture. His charm wasn't sharp like Letterman's, nor political like Jon Stewart's. His gift was neutrality. He was the class clown who never took a side, who played games, sang parodies, and turned interviews into party tricks. It worked, for a time. But behind the glitter, cracks began to show. Whispered stories emerged. Anonymous staffers describing a tense workplace, unpredictable moods, and a host whose laughter didn't always reach his eyes. Then came the cultural blows. The infamous Donald Trump hair tousling moment in 2016, when Fallon's attempt at harmless fun was blasted as complicity, a smiling normalization of a political figure dividing the nation. His brand, built on staying safe, suddenly looked reckless. And now, seated across from him, Miley Cyrus embodied everything his brand could not contain: unpredictability, defiance, raw authenticity. Back in the studio, Fallon tried to steer the energy back to familiar waters. His voice lifted, too cheerful. "So, Miley, tell us about your new album," he said, fingers tapping nervously on his desk. Miley tilted her head, lips curling into a half-smile that carried no warmth. "You really want to talk about the music?" she asked, tone heavy with implication. "Or do you just want another headline you can turn into a joke tomorrow?" The audience tittered, unsure if it was humor or hostility. Fallon's grin faltered before he caught himself, reaching for his note cards as though they were lifelines. No, of course," he said quickly. "We love your music. We're excited about the tour." But the words felt hollow, fragile. Even viewers at home could sense it. The studio had become a chessboard, and Fallon was playing defense. Outside those walls, the broader picture sharpened. Fallon wasn't just fighting Miley. He was fighting time. In the age of TikTok rants, YouTube confessionals, and unfiltered Instagram lives, the polished artifice of late night looked dated. Younger audiences craved rawness, even chaos. Fallon's refusal to engage in politics, to risk offense, left him adrift in a landscape where controversy wasn't avoided, it was currency. And tonight, that currency belonged entirely to Miley. She leaned closer, her voice steady, deliberate. "You've built a sea. Ari making everything light," she said, the words carrying the gravity of an indictment. "But some things aren't supposed to be light, Jimmy. Some things deserve to be heavy." Fallon blinked, his eyes darting briefly to the camera, then back to her. For a second, he seemed like a defendant caught mid-trial, unsure how much the jury had already turned. The audience murmured again, restless, like a crowd sensing that what they were watching was not entertainment, but history. In the control room, a producer hissed into the mic. "We need to cut to music. We need to break this tension now." But another voice overruled. "No, let it play out. This clip is already viral." Because that was the truth of Fallon's empire. The very machine designed to protect him thrived on chaos. The network wasn't loyal to the host. It was loyal to the spectacle. And tonight, spectacle had taken a shape Fallon could not control. The stage lights gleamed down, merciless. Fallon shuffled his cards, tried to force laughter back into the air, but the laughter sounded thin, drowned by the weight of a guest who had stopped playing along. And somewhere in that silent tug-of-war, the foundation of late night cracked again. What had once been America's safest room was beginning to look like a courtroom, and the jury was no longer in the studio. It was out there, in millions of living rooms, holding their verdict in the palm of their hands, ready to deliver it with a tweet, a clip, a hashtag. The Tonight Show still looked glossy, still glittered beneath its lights, but behind the veneer, everyone watching could feel it. The empire was fragile, the mask was slipping, and one confrontation had set the stage for collapse. The second segment began like any other. Fallon adjusted his cufflinks, the desk light gleaming off polished wood. The cue cards trembled slightly in his hand, though only the sharpest eyes could notice. The band struck a playful tune, and the studio audience clapped on command, filling the air with the illusion of normalcy. but tension lingered, an invisible fog from the clash that had already unsettled the room. Every smile seemed tighter, every laugh too quick, every pause too long. Fallon leaned forward, flashing his signature grin, the one that had carried him through a decade of late-night charm. "So, Miley," he began lightly, "you've reinvented yourself more times than anyone I know. Country, pop, rock. You're basically a musical chameleon. Do you ever wake up and think, who am I today?" The audience chuckled, waiting for the punchline. Fallon tilted his head, expecting Miley to volley the joke back, to laugh at her own transformations the way so many celebrities had before. Instead, she leaned back, folding her arms across her chest. Her lips curled into something that looked less like a smile and more like a challenge. "Who am I today?" she repeated, her tone slow, deliberate. "I'm someone who's tired of being asked that question. Because it's not about reinvention, Jimmy. It's about survival. Every time I changed, it wasn't a costume. It was me trying to breathe in an industry that keeps trying to suffocate me." The laughter in the room sputtered, then died. Fallon's grin froze. He tapped his fingers against his cue cards, buying time, scrambling to recover. Sure, he said, his voice pitched just a little too high. "But come on, you've got to admit, some of those moments were pretty wild. That VMA performance? Legendary. You licking a sledgehammer? Iconic." Miley's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. "Legendary for who? For you? For the people who profited off making me a headline instead of a human being? Because I didn't feel iconic, Jimmy. I felt like everyone was laughing while I was burning alive." Gasps rippled through the audience. A woman in the third row pressed her hand to her mouth. Fallon's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning, brittle, forced. He chuckled nervously, shifting in his seat. Hey, we're just having fun here. That's what this show's about." "Fun?" Miley's eyes didn't waver. "Fun for who?" she asked again, echoing the words that had already hung in the air earlier that night. "Because I don't remember it being fun for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the band, usually quick to throw in a musical sting, stayed quiet, their instruments still as if they too sensed the gravity of the moment. Fallon shuffled his cards again, desperate for an escape hatch. "Well," he said quickly, "let's not get too heavy." But Miley cut him off, her voice calm, steady, undeniable. "That's the problem, Jimmy. You never want to get heavy. You want everything to be light, even when people are breaking. That's why this whole system feels fake. You keep smiling while people drown." The audience murmured, shifting in their seats, a ripple of unease spreading like static electricity. It was no longer a talk show. It was testimony, a witness refusing to play along with the script. Fallon forced a laugh, tilting back in his chair as though to reclaim control. "You're killing me here," he joked weakly. Miley shook her head, her voice rising just enough to carry weight. "No, Jimmy. What's killing people is pretending that laughter fixes everything. That's not comedy. That's denial." The words struck like a gavel. In the control room, the debate raged again. Cut to commercial, or let it roll. One producer muttered, "If we cut now, it looks like we're protecting him." Another snapped back, "If we don't, this could sink us." The director, sweating under the pressure, kept the cameras locked, sensing the kind of clip that explodes online before the credits roll. On stage, Fallon forced himself upright, still trying to thread the needle between charm and defense, but the audience's eyes were no longer on him. They were on Miley. Her every gesture, every word, charged with authenticity he couldn't match. What began as banter had mutated into battle. And as the crowd sat in uneasy silence, they could feel it. The first sparks had caught fire. The Tonight Show was no longer in control of the narrative. The guest was. The studio lights felt hotter now, no longer soft and flattering, but harsh, exposing. Fallon sat stiffly, cue cards trembling in his hands, as though they might shield him from what was unraveling. His smile, once his strongest weapon, had begun to betray him. Each attempt to soften the mood landed like glass shattering on marble. He tried again. "So, Miley," Fallon said, forcing cheer, You've always been unpredictable. I mean, you never know what you're going to do next. That's what makes you so fun." He winked at the audience, fishing for laughter. I mean, who else rides a wrecking ball naked and still ends up selling out stadiums? A burst of laughter erupted, too loud, too desperate, the sound of people clapping because the cue lights told them to. But beneath the surface, unease rippled. Miley didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. Instead, she leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees, her stare locked on Fallon with unflinching intensity. "You think that's funny?" she asked quietly, her voice so calm it sliced through the artificial cheer. "Because for me, that wasn't a joke. That was me trying to reclaim my body, my image, after years of being treated like an object. But you sit here, years later, and turn it into another late-night punchline." The laughter died instantly. The room fell still, the only sound the faint hum of the studio equipment. Fallon's grin faltered. Hey, he said, his tone dropping into defense. "I didn't mean anything by it. It's all love. It's—" Miley cut him off, sharper now. "No, Jimmy. That's the problem. You don't mean anything. That's your whole brand. No meaning, no risk, just safe little laughs while real people's pain gets turned into entertainment." Gasps rippled across the crowd. A man in the front row shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at the cameras as though worried they'd catch his unease. Fallon's face flushed. His hand tightened around the cue cards until the edges bent. "Look, we're just trying to have a good time here. That's the point of this show." Miley shook her head slowly, her voice rising, steady and unshakable. "That's the point of this show. To laugh at people, to laugh through everything so no one ever has to face the truth. But do you know what that does? It silences us. It turns our stories into skits. It makes everything a joke, even when it isn't." The words echoed like a gavel slamming. In the control room, producers scrambled. "We need to go to break," one hissed. "He's losing control." Another voice, colder, calculated. "No, this is the kind of moment people replay. Let it roll." On stage, Fallon forced another laugh, brittle and sharp-edged. He tried to regain footing, the way he always had when interviews veered off track, with a joke. "Well, at least you didn't swing in on a disco ball this time, right?" he quipped, eyes darting for an ally in the crowd. But the joke didn't land. The audience didn't laugh. They shifted in their seats, uncomfortable witnesses to something rawer than comedy. Miley leaned in closer, her voice quiet but thunderous in its restraint. "You see? Even now, when I'm telling you the truth, you can't help yourself. You have to reduce it to a gag, because that's all you know how to do. Smile, laugh, deflect." Fallon's chest rose and fell faster now. His fingers tapped against the desk in a frantic rhythm. He forced a smirk, but it trembled at the edges. "This is live television," he muttered, half to her, half to himself. Miley's reply came swift, unflinching. "Good, then let them see it." The audience gasped again, some whispering nervously, others leaning forward as though they had front-row seats to a trial that had just reached its breaking point. Fallon sat back, his grin gone, replaced by something harder. A flash of anger, of wounded pride. He glanced briefly at the camera, then back at her, and for a split second, the mask dropped. He was no longer the charming host. He was a man cornered, fighting to keep hold of a stage slipping away from him. But Miley didn't flinch. Her presence filled the space, her words cutting through the facade like a witness who refuses to be silenced. The Tonight Show stage, once a playground of easy laughs, had transformed into something far more dangerous. A courtroom of culture, where every word was evidence, every silence a verdict. By the time the band stumbled into a forced musical cue, the tension was unbearable. Fallon's face glistened under the hot lights. Miley's eyes still burned with defiance, and the audience, caught between the expectation of laughter and the shock of confrontation, knew they had witnessed a line being crossed. The clash wasn't comedy anymore. It was revelation, and the jokes, once his sharpest weapon, had finally cut too deep. While the audience sat frozen beneath the blinding stage lights, another battle raged in the shadows just beyond the velvet curtains. The control room was chaos. Headsets buzzed with overlapping voices. Monitors flickered with feeds from every angle of the stage. The director hunched forward, eyes darting between camera shots. Fallon's forced grin, Miley's unflinching stare, the audience's restless faces. "Cut to break," one producer barked, sweat dripping down his temple. "We can't let this keep going. Fallon's losing control." Another voice shot back, sharper, colder. "Are you insane? Do you see the numbers? Social engagement just spiked. This is going viral before the segment even ends. If we cut now, we look like we're protecting him." The room split in two. Half the team scrambling for safety, the other half calculating risk like traders on Wall Street. What mattered wasn't Fallon, wasn't Miley. It was the clip. The 30-second explosion that could dominate Twitter feeds, TikTok stitches, YouTube reaction videos. Inside the studio, Fallon shuffled his cards again. Inside the studio, Fallon shuffled his cards again, his hands visibly trembling under the desk. He laughed nervously, searching for any thread of control. Miley sat unmoved, her gaze fixed, her voice sharp. The audience locked in rapt silence. Backstage, an assistant rushed in, clutching a phone. "We're trending on Twitter, already." The words sucked the air out of the room. Screens lit up with hashtags. #Miley on Fallon. #silenced. On tonight. #Fallon vs Miley. Clips ripped from live streams were already circulating, captioned with fire emojis, declarations of support, accusations of betrayal. The machine they had built to contain entertainment had already lost the battle to the internet's hunger for chaos. The executive producer pressed his palms into his temples. "If we let her keep going, she'll burn him alive on his own stage. If we shut her down, we look like censors. Either way, Fallon comes out weaker." Another producer leaned in, voice low but resolute. "Then maybe we don't protect Fallon. Maybe we protect the brand. People don't tune in for him. They tune in for the spectacle. Right now, she is the spectacle." Silence rippled through the room. For years, Jimmy Fallon had been the face of NBC's late-night empire. His goofy impressions, his lip-sync battles, his boyish charm. He wasn't just a host, he was the product. But in this moment, the network's loyalty wavered. Fallon was not invincible. He was expendable. A headset crackled. "What do we do if she walks off? Or if he does?" The executive producer straightened, eyes narrowing. "We don't let either happen. Not yet. This clip is already out of our control. Our only play is to let it ride. But make sure she doesn't completely own the narrative. Keep cameras wide. Don't let her dominate close-ups. Balance the shots." It was a strategy born of desperation, an attempt to edit the trial in real time, to control the jury's view before the verdict was set in stone. Meanwhile, Fallon's voice cracked faintly on stage. We're having a deep conversation here tonight," he said, a shaky laugh trailing after the words. The audience responded with uncertain applause, the sound awkward, strained. Miley's eyes never left him. "No, Jimmy, you're having a deep crisis. I'm just telling the truth." Backstage, one producer groaned aloud. "She's killing him." Another grinned, cynical but impressed. "She's giving us the best TV we've had in a decade." Phones buzzed again, this time with calls from the higher floors of 30 Rockefeller Plaza. NBC executives, awakened by frantic alerts, demanded updates. "What's happening down there? How bad is it?" The executive producer spoke flatly, without looking away from the monitors. "We've lost control of the segment. It's not comedy anymore, it's a showdown. And America's watching it live." Silence on the line. Then, "Keep rolling. This might be history." Inside the studio, Fallon attempted another transition, clutching for safe ground. "So, tell us about your—" But Miley interrupted, her voice cutting like steel. "You want to change the subject because it makes you uncomfortable. That's the problem. You only let people speak as long as it's easy to laugh at." The audience gasped again. Fallon's face flushed crimson. The studio air grew thick, suffocating. And backstage, the producers leaned closer to their monitors, watching as the host they had built their empire around unraveled before their eyes. Because in that moment, it became clear. Fallon wasn't running The Tonight Show anymore. The network wasn't running it either. Miley was, and no one behind the curtain could stop her. The Tonight Show stage had never felt smaller. The audience, once cheerful participants in late-night ritual, now sat on edge, silent jurors trapped in a courtroom where no one had expected a trial. Fallon's laughter had vanished, replaced by the brittle smile of a man cornered. Miley's voice carried the weight of testimony, steady, unyielding, each word slicing the